Hello, this is Bradley Elisea, and today I'm going to be talking about Discussions 1. And this is part of our Discussions Public Events and Contributors series. So let me share my screen. I prepared some references here. So let's go. Okay, so we have our discussions. This is a file I've compiled myself. So there are a couple of topics I'd like to cover in this video. The first one is that if you have discussions are an important part of a community, and it doesn't seem like it. It seems like people just talk and they don't really, it doesn't really amount to much. And that's what you want to kind of avoid. You want to avoid conversation that doesn't go anywhere. This is why you want to spend so much time paying attention to detail in this area. So this can lead to a lot of nice things. A lot of good discussion and something that's channeled properly can lead to a lot of nice contributions. So if we have, for example, a discussion about something like, I don't know, some serendipitous thing that you come across, like an article in a newsletter or a paper, and you start discussing it with someone of like mind in the community, and then you come up with some idea. And then that idea, you continue to discuss it and shape it. And eventually you get to the point where you can actually create something useful out of it or move it forward in some way. And that's really what the goal is. So the goal is to move those discussions forward in a productive manner, to build upon discussions that have happened previously. And so this requires two things. It actually requires some infrastructure. So you need to build a forum for people to communicate in. And then you need to have sort of rules of the road or sort of ideas about how you want to make your participation and your discussions go forward. So for example, in some communities, they work towards building GitHub issues, or sometimes they're, people like to be inclusive and have meetings where everyone is allowed to make their voice heard. And so those sorts of things help facilitate discussion in your community. Since you don't really know where the discussions are coming from, you want to be as inclusive as possible, but you also want to make sure that they don't run off the rails. You want to use your code of conduct to make sure that they don't get to be disruptive to the community and so forth. So we have some participation types, and this is something that I've worked on in the Rockwire community and kind of in other communities as well. There are a number of participation types, and I'm going to go through what those are. So we have a category called discussion leader / shaper. And so the discussion leader / shaper category actually is this diagram. And it shows you kind of what this involves. So let me zoom into this and go over this diagram. So we have a diagram here. It kind of shows what's involved in this. You'll see that you have a couple of different pathways. The first pathway is, okay, I'm gonna have to go into that. Okay, for our diagram, you have two different pathways. The first is a contributor idea. So we're starting off with just an idea that someone has. So how do we facilitate that idea forward? So a contributor has an idea, and it's a pretty rough idea. It's just some fluke that they say, well, I think that we should have like choice of colors for the background. And so that's pretty vague. We don't know how to implement it. We don't even really know what that would look like. We don't really know too much except that you have this idea. So how do you make this a reality? Well, we have sometimes in some communities, and in the Rockwire community, we've had this. It's called a feedback board. And so feedback boards are places where you can post comments, and then those comments are upvoted or downvoted. And then you promote the upvoted ones. And if you don't get any votes or it's downvoted, you change you go through the discussion, maybe some comments, suggestions for improvement. The person then shapes their idea to match those suggestions, and then maybe they get some more upvotes. So it's a way of refining ideas. And of course, if you're upvoted, that doesn't mean you can't refine your idea. It means that people like the idea, but it may need some more development. So we have two different types of things that we usually do in a feedback board. We monitor upvotes and we monitor comments. And so if something is highly upvoted, that's obviously something we want to promote. But if the comments are good, or if the person who's monitoring the board, say like the community manager, thinks that it's a good idea and people just haven't commented on it for whatever reason or upvoted it, they can still promote the idea to some next step. And so this is the moderation box here. And this is basically someone who takes the job of moderating the board, making decisions, someone who knows a little bit more about the app or knows more about the community and what people are looking for. And they can serve to promote certain parts of the idea, certain ideas. They can communicate with the person who left the comment. They can provide comments. And the purpose of this is sort of this iterative shaping process. Okay. So now that the moderator has taken a pass at it, now it's time to promote some of this idea, or maybe some parts of this idea, to GitHub issues. So issues are, of course, they don't have to be restricted to GitHub, but we're using GitHub issues in this example. So you would take the idea and you would break it up into GitHub issues. And this would be the moderator in conjunction with the person who has the idea. The idea is to take this large concept and boil it down into some actionable issues. So this is, this may not be one step. This may be multiple steps, multiple meetings, multiple discussions. But getting it down into these issues is important, because then you can make, they're actionable. You can make actions on them. You create a series of issues. You tag the code owner of that repository. You interact with the participant more. The internal development team interacts with the participant, people who are really close to the code, and they give, they get an even better sense of what needs to be done. So if I put an issue up like create colors in, some interface, that's still pretty vague with respect to how it's actually going to be done, but at least it's an actionable item. So then the GitHub issue is created. Then there's some discussion on the GitHub issue as to how actually to do this, what lines of code need to be changed and so forth. And this can be done, this doesn't have to be like an internal development team. This could be some other contributor who knows how to do this. And so, this is pretty flexible in an open source context with respect to who does this. The important point is that we go from a vague idea to an issue to something that can be implemented. And then the next step, hopefully, is a successful code-related contribution. Now you have your program, your app, and it has a background of different colors on it. So you go from concept to implementation. Another form of discussion that we have, aside from the discussion board, is that we have these different channels. So we have a Slack and a Discord channel in our community. You can use different things. You can use Discourse, and there's another video discussing discussion forums and how that goes along. Actually, we're going to talk about that in this group, but there's another contributors section where we talk about this in a little bit more detail. So later on in this session, we'll talk about this more. There's the Slack. I'm using examples of the Slack team and a Discord server. So, you can use them both for the same purpose, but it may make sense to specialize some of these things. So the Slack team, for example, might be for general announcements. You might onboard people into the Slack team so that they can get access to some general announcements, whereas you might use the Discord server for special events. And we have a series on events and event planning and all that. That's another video in the series, and you can find out more about that. But all of that can be coordinated using a Discord server. And the idea that is to get people involved in conversation in these forums, where you have channels and you have people joining the channels, and there's some spontaneous discussion, but there's also discussion from the top down. You can make announcements, for example. So both of these types of channels rely on moderation. We'll want to moderate the channel and make sure that people don't, violate the code of conduct, or that there's not people spamming. People can join just to spam the channel, and we don't want that. But we also want to, kind of direct the conversation. So if someone has a good idea, maybe we direct it towards that idea. Or if we have, other types of things going on, things that we can tie, like the moderator knows what's happening in all the channels in that server. And so they can route people to different conversations that are going on, different side channel conversations, they would never know about otherwise. So this is a good way, this moderation stuff is important to sculpting the conversation. So, you want to facilitate as much productive conversation as possible. So two things actually come out of these productive conversations, hopefully, if you've done it right. People are starting to create issues from these conversations. They may be like a code related issue, maybe something even like a tutorial, or it could be like an event, like a talk or a hackathon or something like that. So, this is something that is pretty broad. It could be a GitHub issue. It could be like something else. If you coordinate everything on GitHub, creating GitHub issues to remind them to make a tutorial or to host a hackathon, but those are nominally separate things than say like a GitHub issue for the code base itself. And then secondly, you want to go back to this discussion board and create ideas here. So this contributor idea can be backed up all the way to the second panel here, where they're actually using the Slack and Discord and sculpting that conversation. And then they're sculpting it further here where it's uploaded. I mean, there are a lot of ways you can combine this. The point being is that there are a lot of ways to do discussions. So why don't we go back to our discussions? So that's what we're trying to do. That's the category of contribution we're trying to understand here. So you have your Slack team that you can set up. And I'm going to go through some of these options for setting up discussion channels. And I'm going to talk about their pros and cons. And I'm going to talk about how you do it and why you do it. So this reading says how to set up a community with Slack. So you can actually set up some highly engaged communities using Slack. Slack has its pros and cons. It has a free version, but it's limited in the number of messages you can send. But generally, you can create as many channels as you want. And you have to be careful because sometimes you can create too many channels and it can become overwhelming for people. So they talk about some of these things in this next article, setting up your Slack community for success. So this one is a nice overview of what people are doing with Slack communities and how to make them successful. So you want to set up your channels to spark discussions. So you want to have conversations in the Slack channels. You want to be able to have tractable numbers so people don't throw their attention everywhere and then never get any. I mean, they send you notifications, but if I'm getting 50 notifications from my open source community Slack, maybe I don't check all of them, or maybe I don't check any of them. So be intentional about what channels to create. So this is somewhat important. You want to create channels that are themes in your community. You don't want to create a general 1, general 2, general 3. That's not really how you want to do that. If you want to create channels around themes in your community, things that are going on or things you'd like to see go on, you might create channels around human-computer interaction, for example, or you might create a coders channel, or you might create a tutorial channel, and the like. Maybe not a discussion channel because you want discussion to be all over. So, they're topical, they can be, thematic, but you want to be able to make them so that people can create sort of niches around them. And you have people who are sort of leaders in that channel, and, people will join the channel and see that something's going on. And so it may also be helpful to build personas. So maybe we'll get into personas in another video. But personas actually are interesting. These are things that you build as sort of like you're simulating personalities. So a persona is where you put yourself in the mind of someone else, some other user, some other person who's maybe joining the community. And you say, what would they like to see? And so, that's one of the things you can do. It can be a very informal process where you think, okay, there are people who are interested in human-computer interaction. What might they like to see as subchannels or as content. These are ways you can just kind of optimize this community experience. I mean, there are a lot of different things you can put in the channels. You could put a welcome. So in Slack, you can pin things to the channel. And one of the things you may pin is a welcome. The general channel is good for like bringing people into the Slack. The first thing they see is the general channel. You might have some useful information there, and then, tell them about other advertise other channels in the general. And so it helps them to guide their efforts, where to go and join them. And then announcements. So you always want to announce things if they're happening in your community. You want to give your channels clear, concise names. Tools and software is good, not stuff or tools and stuff. That isn't really informative. You can have private channels. So, not all discussion has to be public. I found that in the communities that I've been involved with, private conversations are also very good. Sometimes you have people who are like leaders and they don't want to tell everyone else what's going on in their leadership discussions. But that's up to you. And you want to stay flexible and reassess. Channels will grow and change and mutate as content is added. So sometimes people will join a channel and the conversation will bifurcate to two different things. And so then you want to maybe migrate people to different channels that are more focused. Maybe you don't. It's up to you. There aren't really any rules. I think people have made suggestions. It's one of those things where you make suggestions and the suggestions are sort of like, they work for me, but maybe not for you. There are no rules to this. And then, make these channels personal. I like to play with emojis. Emojis are nice. You can add emojis pretty easily in Slack. They're just pictures that you find, square pictures with a square dimensions, and you just upload them. So you can upload anything, any kind of image you want. So one of the communities I'm involved with, we deal with a lot of biology. And so there are no good biology emojis. There's some that are like animals and like hatching chicks, but there's nothing for like embryos or phylogenetic trees or any of that. So that's something that needs to be like imported. But there are other emoji sets that are fun. You can get people excited about being in the community just through small things like that. Set up status messages. So when people are away. You want to adhere to code of conduct. You want to have guidelines for content and moderation. So this is important, especially beyond the code of conduct, if you want people to sort of abide by a set of rules. And they don't have to be ethical. They can be just simply like, if you're on the discussion board and you want to post something, it's good to have a set of rules for that interaction. So it's like, okay, what do I need to include in my discussion board post? You need to have a title. You need to have some content in the body. You need to have some links. This allows us to evaluate it properly. If you just throw up this very broad idea, people aren't going to respond to it very easily. They're not going to know like where to start. So you want to have this nice formulaic post, and we'll have guidelines of there will be a guideline thing posted at the front of the discussion board, but to have consistent rules across the community discussions is good, because then you can say, we expect your discussion to be respectful, but also we want you to have certain things in a certain format so we can evaluate quickly. And so, you can screen people. Usually you don't want to just invite anyone into your Slack, because again, you can get spammers. There's etiquette, discussion etiquette. You want to be able to have, what you want to do is you want to pick leaders for this. This is why we have this contribution category of discussion moderator, or shaper. We want people to select people from the community because it's more credible to, really take the lead on some of these things. And they want to be able to lead by example. So if I'm a member of an open source community, I join up and I do a lot of work with discussions, and I know how these discussions go. I can then tell new people what to do. And this is something that, doesn't have to be, doesn't have to be like, you don't have to lecture people. You just have to help them out. And it's leading by example. And, that's something that will help you reinforce rules and etiquette. Okay, so that's a lot about Slack. And it's a really nice tool. It's a powerful tool. There are a lot of ways you can use it. Slack is better than Facebook groups. So sometimes people organize on things like Facebook groups, and Slack does give you more flexibility in that respect. Although it is, you do have to sign up, and there's a barrier to entry there where people have to sign up, but it's usually not that high. And then there's this devil's advocate position. So Slack isn't designed for communities, and here's why. So this is someone who's making the argument that Slack is not actually good for community building. And it's good for teams. Slack was designed for teams working together on projects, but there's some drawbacks. First of all, they don't really advocate themselves as a community tool. It's sort of like, we're for teams, and if you want to use it for a community, fine. And if your community blows up in your face, don't sue us. And that's basically it. So basically, it was supposed to be a replacement for email, and so that's kind of where they're coming from on that. Now, if you're talking about like small groups of people, then Slack is probably can be good for your community. But if you're talking about over 100 members, or you're talking about like more than 10,000 messages, then it becomes harder to manage without paying money. But then when you go to the paid version, it's very expensive. The problem is you can't export messages from Slack. So you have a problem if you want to go back 2 or 3 years. So it's, you have to solve those problems. You select a tool, and this is true of any tool. You select a tool and you have to basically work around its limitations. And so, maybe the limitations are too big to work around, something you have to consider when you choose a tool. So by no means is everyone required to have a Slack team for their community, but they're very common. So and then the features in the interface aren't designed for communities. You can't have very rich user profiles. It's hard to search member profiles. You have to log into each workspace, which is, a team. So you don't have to worry about that as your team. But on the user end, your community member may have 30 Slack teams on their app, because they give you an app on your mobile device or on your computer. They may have up to 30 teams that they belong to. Now, that makes it really hard to cut through the noise. If you're in a community, you have a Slack, they join your Slack, and then they have 29 other Slack teams that you're monitoring. They may or may not come back. But that's something you have to keep in mind as well. The language used in Slack isn't for communities. So, it doesn't really fit a lot of what we might call the affordances of a community. So it's very limited networking features. It's not clear who's in charge. These are all things you have to consider. If your community is of a certain shape already, if you have like a leadership structure, or if you need to have like some guidance, people need to have guidance. These are all things that may or may not be facilitated with Slack. It may make things much worse. So again, these are things that you have to consider. So that's Slack. And then we have Discord. So Discord teams are, it's like Slack. It's a little bit different. This is our Discord channel here. So you get like these links, and you can go in. You can. There's also an app where you go in, and it's like Slack, where you have. They don't call them teams; they call them servers, and you can scale Discord up much more for free. So you can scale it up to much larger communities, and I don't think there's a limit on messages that you can have. So this is something people have often used for communities. A lot of video gamer organizations use this. And so this is, something that is definitely used for communities, but is it the best tool? So this is best practices for starting a great community on Discord. Whether your server or your closest friends have evolved into something much bigger, or you're aiming to start a great community from the get-go, welcome a server owner. So this is where you set up a server, you put the channels in just like Slack, and you're able to manage your community that way. And there's some better tools than Slack has for community. They have something called stage channels, which are audio conversations. They have announcement channels. They have server insights. So like Slack, actually, you have analytics that you can use. So, this is another thing that you'll definitely want to take advantage of, are the analytics to see who's posting, how often they're posting, in what channels are they posting. These are all things that will help you shape your discussion because you'll know where people are and what they're interested in. So, setting up your server here, give people a reason to stay. So everyone should be excited about your community. And that's like the ideal. A lot of times people will, at least if they are persistent in coming back, that's all you can ask for. Like I said, they have a lot of demands on their time. And a lot of these people are just, volunteers. They're not necessarily being paid. So this is something, you'll want to definitely keep people, you want to keep the content fresh, but you'll not want to worry too much about having a circus, because that's not really the point. The point is to have good conversations. The point isn't to just meet a benchmark of 1,000 users or something. So, you can have specific events built around this discussion forum. So, you might have every week, every time at a certain time on a certain day of the week, you might have some discussion in the channel. And you might have we've had this where we've had in office hours in the channel, audio channels, and they will give a lecture or some presentation of what they're doing, and people, whoever's around for that, will see it. But also people come later, can't make that original time, will see that content in the channel and they'll be able to interact with it. So, but this helps you build some authenticity, some intimate connections with people in the community, and they'll become informed about what's going on. So this is nice. Again, you want to maintain a safe space, and you want to be able to do things like, you could have an audio ask me anything, where, you have someone and people will ask them questions, and it's like a Reddit AMA, except it's audio. And so, yeah, so that's what you can use Discord for. So, I mentioned that you could specialize it for special events. Discord is built for that, but you can also say, well, during our hackathon, we're going to communicate in our Discord server. And so that's where all that's going to be. The Slack channels, we won't use that for special events, but maybe for follow-up events, we'll use that. And so it just kind of helps people find a place, know where things are, and it makes them thematic in that way. So then how to build a community on Discord. This is another article where they talk about building a community on Discord. It's a little bit different. They talk about creating your server, inviting other users, organizing community channels, delegating user roles, keeping things active, and just like what we've talked about. So, then there's this issue of onboarding people in either Slack or Discord or both. And you should have a process worked out. So, to keep track of people and people coming in, people who are always requesting to join, you want to automate this process a bit. So you might invite people to join through, say, your newsletters or your public events or other sorts of outreach. You say, oh, by the way, we have a Discord channel, a Slack channel, or a Discord server, Slack channel. Sorry for our team, I guess. I keep saying channel. I should say team and server. But, the point is that you want to invite them to join. But you don't want to just say, you might throw up a link and it's pretty obscure what it means. So there are these automation tools, one of which is Launchpass, which I like to use. This is something that's free. You configure it to your server or your team, and you, instead of giving them this really long URL, and having them email you for the key or whatever, you can, it's a relatively short URL, is launchpass.com/ the name of the community or whatever, however. So it's pretty short and memorable. And you just put that into talks, you put that into like other channels, your newsletter, and then people will join up, they'll sign up, and then it'll automatically send them into the community. You don't have to add them in manually, and then they just pop up in your general channel. And of course, you can get spammers that way, but that's something you just have to monitor. Usually they have to validate their email address, so it does limit that somewhat. So another way to do this is to give people access through a link, invitation, LaunchPass. We talked about that. And then join a channel to become part of a conversation, or tag people to bring their attention to something. So this is, again, where you have this onboarding process where you have people coming into the general channel. You suggest channels that they might be interested in. You say, oh, you should join this channel. This is a good channel for you. Or, you might have a note in your general channel pinned that says, if you're interested in this conversation, join this channel. If you're interested in this conversation, join this channel. It just gives people a guide post to where they need to go. Or, if you have a new person and you know that they're interested in something, you tag them in a different, they're not in that channel, but you tag them and you bring them into that channel. It's just ways to manage people once they're in there. And, that's partially the moderator, partially the people involved who are being asked to join these channels. So you can customize channels and settings, then advertise. So, you customize everything and then you start advertising your space. You say, oh, we have this great Discord. Come on in. And, it's an easy sort of a low barrier to entry. They just click on a link. They go through the sign up process. They're in. Then you make it easy for them to navigate around and to find what they need. So there are a couple of points here. Slack and Discord are private to the internet, meaning they're not posted on the internet for all to see. So it makes it a little bit easier for people to have conversations. They're easy to navigate and to get feedback on things and to manage content. So all these things are true of Slack and Discord. It may not be the easiest in the world to manage, to search for content, but definitely you can manage content in the channels more easily than if you just sent emails or if you posted it in a Usenet server or something without any categories. You can directly answer questions in threaded discussions. You can have threaded discussions in these channels and then go back and reference them. Now, the drawback to a lot of this is that you have what I have kind of referred to previously, but it's called a message avalanche. And that is too many messages per unit attention. So remember, people have a finite amount of attention. And, it's organized in time. So, I shift my attention around, but I also have a finite capacity for things in my attentional buffer. And so, you don't want to give people too many messages to sort through. So, they lose interest, but you also don't want to give them too many things at once that hit them at once, like, oh yeah, do this. You want to break up the instructions a little bit more. So there are some tools for this. This is Zapier, Stay Focused on Slack. This is about how to survive Slack. Survive on a Slack that's way too busy, and they give you pointers on what kinds of things are going on. So, you don't want to become distracted. You want to maintain focus, but you also don't want to miss out. And so they kind of tell you how to optimize this. You might aggressively leave channels. You might use threads when you need to and then leave when they're not useful. There are different ways to do this. There's also, getting organized by keeping your Slack tidy and scannable. And this is just, again, how not to get overwhelmed by your Slack. And so, this just gives you some pointers. Customize your sidebar with sections, so you can sort your channels by section, by topic. There are different ways to do that. You can read unread conversations only. Different people have different strategies, but you should share these with your community so they know kind of what to expect. And so, there are different ways to set up your conversation channels. Finally, you can review channels in a meeting. So you can have meetings that are like weekly, video meetings, where you discuss different things in the channels. You can go to a channel and kind of go through them one by one and review what's been happening that week. Then if you record that meeting, you can go back to that reference and you say, oh yes, I remember this thing that was in the meeting or was in the Slack channel 4 or 5 weeks ago. I wonder if people had anything to say about that. And that's a nice like mental aid because it breaks up some of these channels or reviews of content into week-long chunks. And so it helps people go back. Oh yeah, it was a couple of weeks ago when we checked this video. They check the video, they see how it, what happens to, what happened to this conversation. Did people have something to say that was like more than what they put in the Slack? Sometimes that facilitates more conversation as well on video. So there are different ways you can annotate this. So yeah, I think definitely meetings are a way to like go through a lot of this, to winnow out the noise, to get hooked into things that are interesting. But there are other, this is just one option. So for both Slack and Discord, there are a couple of things that are true of both of them. First of all, you want to be able to manage and post links, start conversations, respond to all posts, and especially as a moderator, you want to do this. File sharing, there's file sharing, so you can share files. You can index and search your chat. You have a channel structure, and you have DMs, so you can direct message people. Another thing you can set up, and I didn't put this on here, are you can set up bots. And bots allow you to do specific functions that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So you can automate a lot of things in Slack and in Discord using bots. I've used bots for stand-up meetings where you ask people, what have you done this week? You have all these bots that pop up once a week and they just ask you some questions. They keep you on task and they keep people thinking about what their goals are. You can also automate some of these onboarding procedures. So people come into the community, they they don't know where to go. You can automate some of this through a bot. It'll guide them. You don't have to worry about moderating that or doing it manually. So it helps the moderators out quite a bit. Now we turn to GitHub Discussions, and GitHub Discussions is this upvoting and downvoting system that I mentioned previously. So this is an example of discussions. I won't really go into that link too much, but suffice it to say, this is something that's incorporated into GitHub. So I can set up a board on GitHub and I can take a discussion and I can follow through, I can add comments, I can upvote, and then I can automatically turn that into a GitHub issue. So it's very useful for that from that perspective. It's automatic. You set it up in the repository where you want it to be. You can turn them, turn the conversations into GitHub issues directly or create new GitHub issues. Everything is pretty much integrated into it as it's all on the same repository. So this is a place where you set up a forum where ideas can be upvoted and promoted to GitHub issues. You want to be able to accrue a discussion for further action. So you can take that discussion you've had about that issue, turn it into a GitHub issue, and now anyone who addresses that issue can see the full conversation within the issue. They don't have to go hunting for the conversation as it existed 4 months ago. It's all there. We have one for Rockwire community. There's an example of one here. And so this is a very useful tool for kind of like guiding these guided discussions where you're wanting people to upvote things. You can do that just as easily, and well, not just as easily, but you can do that in Slack and Discord as well. But sometimes they get lost in the channels, and you certainly can't turn things automatically into GitHub issues. You have to go out and maybe even if you use Jira, it's a little bit easier with GitHub Discussions because if you're using Jira, there's integration. I'm not sure if there's integration between Slack and GitHub or Slack and Jira for issue management, but that's a thing. When you have an integration, it always has limitations on it. So finally, I'm going to talk about Discourse, not Discord, but Discourse. Discourse is quite a bit different Discord because Discourse is a full-blown sort of discussion forum. This requires you to set up your own server. But once you do, you can customize your discourse, and it runs on the web. So there's a URL that's used for a discourse community. And usually you have to have the person log in and join up. But once they do, they have a lot of nice resources available to them. So this is a video here, introduction to discourse. There are some examples of discourse. I am on this eLife discourse, but I'm also on this NeuroStars discourse. This is a nice one to join if you're interested in neuroscience. And the way it works is basically you have this forum where you have these discussions that you join, and you can organize them by tags. And so it's all in one place. There are no channels per se. They're just discussion topic tags and discussion threads. And then you have your user, you have messages sent to you, you have different tasks sometimes you have to perform to join a discussion. What's interesting about Discourse is that they have a certain threshold for being involved in that community. So just joining the community isn't enough to participate in it. You need to do some things. You need to like some posts. You need to be there for like a certain amount of time before you can even start to post. And that sort of structure where the rules are built into the platform, it's actually quite useful and powerful. So this is a summary here where it summarizes my account. So if I go into this summarizes my account. This is all my activity on this Discourse server. You have different things, different topics that I've liked, top topics, top replies, most replied to people, top links, this sort of thing. It just gives you some personal statistics. My activity actually has, I have some things that I've talked about here, different, again, we have these discussion tags. So there are different threads of discussion that are led by certain people. You've been a part of that discussion. It gives you that. It gives you your messages, your invites, and then you get these badges, which are things that they award for being around for a while. And they give you not only badges, but privileges with increased use. And so that's what makes this really powerful. This badges, because, you want to be able to like promote people, but you can't necessarily do that just by, if you have 100 people in your Slack or Discord, it's hard to see who's doing what. You can kind of sense it, but Discord builds that into the system. And so it's very nice to have that. They just basically promote people who are the most active, who are the most helpful in building discussions. So it's organized discussion. They have these themed buckets of discussion. They categorize them using colored badges so people can see where they're contributing, where they can find similar topics. And then the message themselves use Markdown. So they don't just use plain text. You can create messages in Markdown, which means you can create headers and links that aren't naked links. So you can embed them in text. You can put images in your messages. You can stylize your messages in a way that's, looks attractive and conveys more information. Then they have these trust levels in Discourse. So trust levels are where, you have a number of different users, like 1,000 users in your community. So I talked about scaling up before. If you have 1,000 users, who's the most active? So, that's, again, you have to decide who's the most active. You have to measure that. Discourse does that all automatically. But then when you have your, the way that communities work is that you have a small subset of people who are most active, and then a lot of people who are less active, or they're lurkers or something else. You want to identify those most active people, and you want to incentivize them for their efforts. So you want to help them stay most active, basically. But you also want to incentivize less active participants, maybe to be more active. You want to provide them with tools to become more active, because these may be some of your more active users down the road. So, you have 3 types of community member: casual, regular, and core. So your casual are people who lurk around and may post a message every once in a while. Regulars are maybe people who come once a week. And then your core members are there every day doing different things. They have, in Discourse, they have 5 levels: a visitor, novice, regular, leader, and elder. And so these are like both the amount of time you've been in the community and your overall level of participation. And so breaking that out like that in terms of, role or category is powerful and helps people, reinforces good behaviors. So, there are different criterion that you have to meet. So there are different things you have to do to meet a certain criterion. So to become a member in a community, you have to do a couple of things. You have to get to what they call level 2. So that involves visiting for at least 15 days, not sequentially, casting at least one like, receiving at least one like to one of your messages, replying to at least 3 different topics, entering at least 20 topics, reading at least 100 posts, and spending a total of 60 minutes reading posts. So you see that, like, to become a member, you don't just do one thing, like, and then, if you have like one comment that goes viral and everyone likes it, that doesn't just make you a member. You have all these things you need to do, which means that you're really engaging with things. You're listening, you're talking, you're, interacting in different ways. And so, and then you're coming back on a regular basis. So all of that put together makes you a member. And, I think a member is probably maybe less intense than that, but that's the way they have it set up. But, you can see the point. These categories have different criterion, and you want to have a mix of criterion to make sure that people are doing all the virtuous behaviors that they can. Okay. So you can use things like the invite others to this topic button for one-click onboarding. You can invite users to different discussions. You can make a group discussion. You can have different settings, so you can set up your discourse the way you want it. You can set up some of the parameters for involvement. But this trust levels, and this is a good video on this to sort of describe what these are. These all build a level of trust. So the more you're involved, the more trust you have, and then it's shown by your category on Discourse. Everyone can see the category. And so this blog post also goes through understanding Discourse trust levels. So that's probably the best example of something that really facilitates community that I've seen. Then you have these measures that you can use. So they're community databases. There are all these analytics for all 3 types of discussion forum, Discourse, Slack, and Discord. There's simple counts like signups, posts, and page views. Those are easy to identify, spot. Those mark kind of the most popular conversations, the most active users. Then you have these constructs, and this is something needs a Discourse, which is the daily average views and monthly average, over monthly average views. So it tells you how people are sticking around the community. And then, of course, if you measure that, it's a bit different than measuring signups or posts, because it's persistence that you're measuring, not just like the number of posts that someone makes. But there are other measures you can come up with. And like in some of my communities, we've done some network analysis of the different contributors and how they're connected to one another. So there, some people have common interests. Those people with common interests, we want to identify them, how they're connected otherwise. So maybe they're connected to some, we might have like groups of people come in the community and they are kind of working together because their interests are in like, they want to, maybe they have a common set of skills like human-computer interaction, or maybe mobile devices. Those people are in different like network groups, network modules, or network cliques. And so we want to find ways to bridge those. So we would look for the connectors in those groups, which are the people who are sort of the leaders or people who are highly connected in those groups. We can look at like the different discussion fora to see who's interacting with whom, and then find those bridges. So there are different ways you can use metrics to analyze your community. So again, like I mentioned before, bots are a very useful feature in Discord and in Slack. And I don't know about Discourse if they have bots, but it's definitely a good way to manage a lot of the grunt work. And you can certainly set up bots to do metrics as well. If you're interested in measuring like network, building a network of your community, or looking at like things like the dynamics of your community over time, you can build a bot to like collect data and do some basic analysis. So there's these bot lists for Discord. There's this article from Wired on the best Discord bots. Slack has the best 51 Slack bots and integrations. So you not only build bots in Slack, but integrations with other platforms. And then, we have a couple of readings on Slack bots. So this final point about going back to this persistence, and I took this from a video that I saw on this topic. I think it was a video I linked to up here. Getting a contributor to stick around for about 2 months, it is what is needed to encourage habit formation. So, you think about habit, think about how to build a habit of going back to the Slack. You have all this noise in your environment. How do you sort it out? One way is to make, help people to keep coming back again and again, and they build that habit of coming back to your specific place. And so this can be very useful to build this, to have this time period where they're first starting out, to get them engaged and get them involved. And if you don't have that, you might lose them. They might come back. And that's the thing about communities, is that people are not, they're doing this fractional work. They're not really doing they might do like a specific thing for a specific amount of time. They might just build contribute a piece of code and then leave, or they might build up gradually to something. So, it really depends on who you're talking about when you talk about like how long should people stick around, or how long people should interact with the community, because quite frankly, people have different uses for it. So that's all I have to say about discussions. Hopefully you learned something here. So thank you for your time.